Hey, John, do you mind if I join you for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Hey, what are you doing over here sitting by the entrance here?
Well, one of the important things about PaizoCon, is, especially this year, is that it's our first return to physical PaizoCon. So it's important that we're keeping safety in mind. So I'm here for an hour to be checking to make sure that anybody entering the premises is wearing a mask and is wearing a mask properly. And if not, to provide them with one of their own and to give them a quick little reminder that it, goes over the nose.
Yeah, I think people have been pretty good here, too. Everybody's been kind of obeying the rules, no trouble. And it's felt like a really, we appreciate you all kind of taking care of us out here. And kind of keeping it small, too. It's a little bit of a smaller get-together this year, yeah?
Yeah, it's definitely been on the smaller side, which, on one hand, there's a bit of that old energy that it's just the crowds, the 35, 40 tables of organized play going at once. You're like, whoa. On the other hand, this is a return to physical conventions for so many people, including our organizers. And so having something that's a little bit smaller that gives us some time to dip our toes back into the process, real helpful. It helps us spin up PaizoCons to be a success now and into the future.
And it's also been nice just for us who are maybe getting back into the con scene after a couple of years, just to kind of ease ourselves back in. We got Gen Con coming up, which is going to be a whole nother beast. But are y'all going to have a big presence over there? Have you decided that yet?
I've only been hearing a little bit directly. So basically, I understand we're going to have a presence, not going to be as large as before, but some of our other folks are going to know the details a lot better than I do.
Well, it's been an exciting year for you, too, because you're the lead developer, right, of Starfinder. That's the right term? Did I remembering correctly?
Senior
developer. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Starfinder senior developer. When we use the term lead developer, any given book is going to have one or two development leads on it. And that's basically the person who's stepping up to set the direction on the project, to shepherd it from beginning to end, and do a lot of the sign-off. So usually for our hardcover books, that's a role that Joe Pacini, our lead designer, and I trade off, or sometimes in the case of Drift Crisis, which we just released, is a shared responsibility, because that was such a different sort of product.
Mm-hmm. And leading up to that, so we're covering everything that's kind of come out since the beginning of the year, and we start off with, I think, my favorite adventure path, maybe Pathfinder or Starfinder, which is Horizons of the Vast. Because it starts off as Ron Lundeen wrote the book one, if I'm remembering correctly. Yes. And you land on a planet, and your player characters are in charge from the get-go, which is not something we normally get in an adventure path. And you are established in this colony, and the PCs make all the decisions to begin with, where to land, how to allocate resources. And how did you feel about this adventure path now that we've seen the whole thing? Were you happy with it? Was it something that y'all got to have been working on for a while, that you were excited to do kind of a sandboxy thing like this?
I think there's a Pathfinder adventure path called Kingmaker that crowd favorite. Owlcat Games picked it up for their first foray into video games with us, and just this question of when are we going to do Kingmaker in space? And so Horizons of the Vast is really answering that sort of itch. And there's the question of what style of sandboxy build up your empire from the ground sort of thing are we going to do? And we kind of decided that the way off space colony, that you're not alone, you're not the only group that's kind of setting up shop in this area. But that there's signs of possibly previous habitation or other mysteries in the area is going to be the best way to do it. So you're setting down roots, but you're also discovering mysteries and having places to go. You have your equivalent of the dungeons or the conflicts, and your neighbors who are like, what if we just annexed the PC settlement? That sounds like a great way to skip ahead a couple of AP volumes. And you're like, no, this is ours. So I think that it's turned out pretty darn well. And it's allowed us to explore some interesting subsystems like hexploration, settlement building, things like that. And yeah, that agency that you give to player characters is really important, where it's not just, next town over sure is being burned down by goblins. Sure it'd be nice if we had some heroes. There's that, but this is really the stakes are yours. The stakes are literally yours. Your profits depend on this thing not burning down. So you have fun with it. So that sense of ownership that you give the player characters, I think, is super important. So we're happy with Horizons of the Vast.
And the other two kind of bigger things that have come out up until Drift Crisis, we had Tech Revolution and we had Galactic Magic, just sort of expanding the lore, expanding the mechanics. How did y'all feel about those books? What was exciting for y'all about those?
So much. Those are two where I was development lead on those. And we were very much looking at what Starfinder already had really well represented, and what were some of the thematic opportunities that were yet to be covered. And there are a lot of great things we can say about Starfinder, especially in the first 2 or 3 years of its publications. But one of the places where we had less information was on a bit of the kind of the ground level stuff. Like we have the Packed Worlds and Near Space books, which are like, you want to hear about this planet? Okay, well here's a page about this planet. It was like, well, hang on, go back. We want to learn about the culture and we want to learn about the people. But these gazetteers really have to cover a whole lot of ground, literally, each time. So there are all these questions like, how do comm units really work? Like, what really is the drift? If I have a question about what is the state of this technology, because we have all these people with different sci-fi backgrounds, like, is it Star Trek-like? Is it Star Wars-like for this thing? And so Tech Revolution, Galactic Magic were great places for us to experience the state of things in the Packed Worlds in particular for technological advancement, as well as what does it mean to be a spellcaster? How do people view magic? Is it like torches and pitchforks if I cast a spell in a town? Is it like, oh, you're a technomancer, me too, let's compare notes? Like, are there career paths for this sort of thing? Mm-hmm. Science fantasy has us ask some really strange and fun questions that sometimes do show up in fantasy, but sometimes are completely beyond the scope of what we would explore in something like Pathfinder. And so these were great opportunities to explore those things. Tech Revolution, though, in particular, just fantastic because we got to explore things like dynamic hacking, which turns hacking into more of an experience, but also Mechs. Like the very first question I got from a fan when we released Starfinder at Gen Con 2017, beyond where's the Starfinder books, because we sold out after the first day, was, so are there mechs? And I was like, well, we have the size huge powered armor over here and a size gargantuan powered armor here, but at that point, anytime you take damage, it's your hit points. It's like, is that really mechs? Is that mech? No. And so we've been itching to do mechs for a long time, but it's also been one of those things where it's like, mechs represent a huge design challenge. Like, there are so many mech properties out there. Like, you're gonna really, which one are you gonna do? Is this gonna be Gundam? Is this gonna be Macross? Like, Zoids? Like, what do you want from us? And so we had to do a lot of balancing acts to try and allow people to recreate whatever mech traditions they wanted to, while still keeping it as easy to get into as possible. And looking back at it and hearing some of the fun reports from the field, I think we had a really good balance on it. So just overall, Tech Revolution and Galactic Magic have been able to show two different sides of the science fantasy elements to show off what Starfinder can offer.
Yeah, and also just answering those ground level questions that GMs are going to get about exactly how do the comm units work, and like what kind of music do people listen to these days? How does shipping work? All that stuff. Like, there's this. When I ran my first Dead Sons adventure, like some of these were the questions that came up, but I didn't have these books at the time. Mm-hmm. So now I think like going back and being able to have these resources to run all those old adventure paths is going to make it so much easier to answer those questions.
Well, one of the other things that ties into, like you mentioned, shipping. Tech Revolution in particular was a great opportunity for us to expand our author list a little bit more. And bring in people who had some of this lived experience with some of these, not necessarily the science fantasy element of it, but, we went to some of our customer service agents at Paizo and we're like, do you want to write the shipping little subchapter, a little article? And they're like, yeah. So they're bringing all of this real world knowledge to make sure that they have a great foundation in what exists in the modern day, and they can kind of translate into that in a science fantasy sci-fi way to say, what if we had warp drive equivalents or drift travel? How would that shape what I already know? And bring that extra hint of, we call it realism, we're playing a tabletop RPG, but like if you get close enough, then suddenly everything feels like it has greater continuity and reality to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It just makes the game that much more fleshed out. So let's send it back to Theo over in Houston, and we'll kind of go over all these books in detail, talk about the maps, the cards, spell cards, everything that's come out lately, and then we'll come back here at the end, we'll talk about what's coming next. Thank you, Theo. But before we jump in, if you also play Dungeons & Dragons, consider picking yourself up some animated spell cards from our sponsor, Hit Point Press. Their tarot-sized, waterproof reference cards feature 8 frames of lenticular animation on one side and all the spell details you need on the back. Each card features unique art representing that spell, and each deck comes with several cards with blank backs, so if you want to write in some Pathfinder or Starfinder spells, you absolutely can. Check them out today at animatedspells.com or at the link below the video. studio. Tilly decided to join me, but we are going to start things off today with maps. We're kicking things off hot with the Starfinder Lava World map. Like all standard flip mats, it's 24 by 30 inches, but folds down to 8 by 10 for easy storage on your shelf. And while these are labeled as Starfinder flip mats, they're generally generic enough for you to use in whatever game you're playing as long as it uses 1-inch squares. This can be a lava world, an active volcano, a red dragon's lair, the elemental plane of fire, or just anywhere with lava flow. The opposite side features a different layout. You've got a lava lake on one side and more of like a lava river on the other. It's $15 or $10.49 for the digital map, and all the prices I mentioned today are for the Paizo web store. You may be able to find these products cheaper at various retail outlets if you want to shop around. To balance out our lava world, we also have our water world. Sans Kevin Costner. The first side of the map features a rocky, tumultuous ocean for swimming or ship-based encounters. You can even use WizKid's cavern pieces here to add some islands to the map if you wanted to. The other side, though, gives you an underwater scene, which is pretty unique. I don't think that we've had any kind of underwater maps before that I've seen. It's particularly great for Skull and Shackles, Ruins of Aslan, or Ghosts of Saltmarsh. It's also $15 or $10.49 digitally. Next here we have the casino. So yeah, this may be a little harder to fit into your fantasy RPGs, but it'll work for your games that are set in modern day or beyond. The first side features a shiny new casino floor with game tables, back rooms, a check-in desk, a centrally placed little fountain there, and a bar. And the other side has a more, let's say, lived-in aesthetic with old school carpet, a bar, lots of those old gaming machines and tables, plus a whole security room. And there's an office with a knocked over chair and bloodstains on the carpet. Once again, $15 or $10.49 digitally. And finally, we have a special map here for the Starfinder Drift Crisis, which we'll be talking more about here in a minute. This map is larger at 27 by 39 inches, though it still folds down to the same 8 by 10 package to store up on your bookcase. One side of the map features a high-tech space installation that can be used for any number of things. Maybe it's the shield generators for a massive ship or a space station, the central operating hub for the evil corporation at the center of your campaign, or a temple to Triune, the new deity who introduced drift travel to the universe. The other side features a nebula-style space scene for your starship battles with a hex grid instead of a square grid. Great for fights inside a nebula, planet's outer atmosphere, or maybe inside the drift itself. Being larger, this map is a bit more expensive at $23 or $16 for the digital version. Next, we have a Flip Tiles expansion pack, Space Station Corridors Expansion. You can combine this deck of 24 double-sided tiles with the Space Station starter set to add some more variety to your space station builds. This not only adds those walking corridors, but also maintenance hatches, Jeffries tubes, a water tank, an incinerator, a trash compactor, and other sort of behind-the-scenes locations that might offer a lot of fun gameplay opportunities. And again, I don't recommend getting these Flip Tiles expansion packs on their own. Definitely try to pick up the starter set first, and then add these expansion packs to give yourself more options. Each tile is 6 inches by 6 inches, and unfortunately, I don't have the Space Station starter set to show you how they look together, but as I collect more of these sets, I'll be able to show you those combinations more often going forward. The Space Station Corridors expansion pack is $20 or $14 if you want to use them digitally. The Space Station starter set is $35 or $25 for the digital download. It comes with 42 double-sided tiles. Moving on to reference cards now, and we've got 2 classic sets today. Battle cards for Alien Archives 1 and 2, and some good old-fashioned spell cards. Let's start with the spell cards. This box here contains spells for all of the core rulebook and the character operations manual. Most of them have the full text, but some are abbreviated for space. Each card does tell you the book and page number for where you can find those spell details, and the card backs are all identical, so there's not unique art for each spell or anything like that. And some of the cards with longer spells forego the back art altogether and just include more text here. The top of the card tells you the name of the spell and the classes and spell levels that can cast it. Then you get all the relevant spell details. The font size may be a little bit small for some folks, so if that's an issue for you, you may want to try before you buy, but they're perfectly readable for me. There are 259 spell cards included, and there's just 1 copy of each. I appreciate that the box allows you to store them vertically like this, so it makes kind of flipping through them and finding a little bit easier. There is some extra room in here as well for additional cards, and you could probably get dividers if you wanted to divide them up by like class or level or what have you. They're standard card size, and they're basic and well-designed. They're utilitarian cards that should help you use and organize your spells as you play without any necessary, bells and whistles. Although PaizoCon, I did mention that they should reach out to Hit Point Press about making some animated spell cards for Pathfinder and Starfinder. I don't know. You can pick these up for $35 or $24.50 if you want them digitally. And next we have this big old box of battle cards. These cards are 4 inches by 6 inches, so much larger than the spell cards here. And they do feature unique art of the creatures on one side of the card and the details on the back. If you've seen some Starfinder stat blocks before, you know they can get kind of long. So some monsters get more than one card to detail all their stat block information. In that case, the front sides of the cards all have identical art. Now, you will want to be careful because the front side not only features the monster art, but also the name of the creature, which may not be information that you want your players to see for free. Normally, I like to clip these on the top of my GM screen using clips, which you can find a link to down below. But be careful with these since they do include the name on the front, so that may not be something you want to share. And the backs of the cards are all well designed and very readable. They're numbered as well to help you keep them in order. They unfortunately don't include the page number to find the creature in the various books, which I think is a little bit of an oversight. But those books are in alphabetical order, so it's not too hard to track down each creature when you need it. For monsters that come with variations like the various sizes of elementals, you do get separate cards for each size, which can be really useful. And this is another set where the storage box is designed to hold the cards flat instead of standing up, making it a little harder to access the card you need. You have to kind of go digging through the box to find them. And the box is just big enough for the included cards, so you won't be able to combine any future card sets with this one in one box. It does feature 315 cards with that gorgeous Starfinder monster art on each. Now keep in mind that these cards focus on alien NPCs and monsters and not the playable race information for making PCs that are also included in these books. Alien Archive 1 and 2 battle cards sell for $60 or $42 digitally. All right, let's move on to some hardcovers now, starting with Galactic Magic. This book does a few similar things that Gods and Magic did for Pathfinder. There's lots of lore about how magic works in the Starfinder setting, plus updated information on lots of Starfinder gods like Desna, Abadar, Iomade, Pharasma, Sarenrae, Urgathoa, Zankuthan, and Caden Kalian. If you're a fan of the Pathfinder pantheon, it's pretty fun to read about what these deities have been up to over the intervening centuries. Caden Kalian admits that he also lost his memories during the gap, just like everybody else, and he didn't handle it all that well. He went on an intergalactic bender that almost ended his entire church, but he managed to recover and recommitted himself to helping folks with substance abuse problems. So while he was originally just a god of alcohol and bars, now he's widened his purview to merriment and happy gatherings of all kinds as long as they welcome everybody. Each existing class gets a few new player options as well. The biohacker gets thaumaturgy as a field of study, thaumaturgy being the study of inherent magic in all living things. They can also learn how to hack ley lines. Envoys can gain the psychic expertise and the spell speaker ability, which allows them to talk to magical forces as if they were living things. The mechanic gains access to some experimental apparati that seem to combine technology and magic. The mystic gains the arcane and first world connections, which open up new abilities for them. The nanocyte can enhance their nanites to become Eldritch nanites, unlocking a lot of new abilities. The operative can become a spell thief or a magical assassin. The Solarian can bring a little asymmetry to their character to reap some interesting benefits with the Broken Cycle and Stellar Sage class features. The Soldier can gain the Spell Brawler and Archer fighting styles. And yeah, the Archer uses an actual bow and arrow and not a laser rifle, though there are new so-called Apocalypse bows, which may be interesting to you. The Technomancer can gain access to an extra planar tutor who could be an Aeon, a Celestial, an Elemental, a Fiend, an Inevitable, or a Protean. The Vanguard can choose the Mutual Destruction alternate class feature to forego defense for an all-in approach to combat. They also gain the Apocalypse and a Rebound aspects. And the Witch Warper gains the Infinity Lash ability if you want to whip your way around the multiverse. And the Projected ability if you want to make your character someone who is only projected into this universe from another one. And finally, a new class is introduced, the Precog. Where the Witch Warper manipulates the multiverse to achieve their ends, so does the Precog play the strings of time. They are a Dex and intelligence-based light armor class caster. You choose an anchor in time from which you draw your power. That can be chronomancy from some guardian of time, the dimension of time time itself, a doomed future for the universe, a fragmented past event that shouldn't have happened, a technological attempt at time travel, or just the gap. Many abilities of the precog use something called a paradox, where at the beginning of your adventuring day, you pre-roll a d20 a number of times equal to 1 plus half your dex modifier and jot down that result. As you level up, you can use those results of those paradoxes for more and more things, from ability checks to saves to initiative rolls to attack rolls. Their spell list is pretty well balanced, but more than any other class, it focuses on mitigating risk. You can kind of see the theme here. And there's lots of options for re-rolling checks and saves. If your character concept involves anything to do with divination, being a Cassandra-style fortune teller, or being any type of time traveler, the precog should definitely be one of your top class choices. And you'll end up being the character who can probably save the day at the most crucial moment when things look like they're starting to fall apart. And of course, Galactic Magic also comes with loads of new spells and gear and lots of magical lore and campaign and story hooks as well. It comes in at around 156 pages. You can pick it up for $40 on the Paizo store or $10 for the PDF. You gotta love the Paizo Rulebook PDF pricing. On the flip side of things, we also got Tech Revolution, which may be my favorite Starfinder book yet. As we spoke about with John, this book gives us a ton of great lore and background information about how technology works in Starfinder, which just makes running campaigns so much more fulfilling. One of the hardest things about running Starfinder campaigns for me is just wrapping your head around the details of the setting. The classic medieval fantasy of D&D and Pathfinder isn't really that hard to wrap your head around. We've all kind of gotten used to Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, and many other things, and those settings all have a lot in common. But when we talk about sci-fi, man, Star Trek, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, The Expanse, Farscape, Altered Carbon, the Jetsons. The details of all those universes could not be more different. So this book actually gives you a couple of pieces of fiction set in Absalom Stations and other places to help you get a sense of what everyday life is like. Plus that long chapter laying out the details of everything from comm units to biotech to body modifications to food and domestic technology to those infospheres that are mentioned everywhere in Starfinder adventures. And you even get information about reality TV and sports and news broadcasts for any murder bots on board who don't want to miss out on their stories. The book is worth it for just these chapters alone, but it also brings us a lot of player options. First, we get the new Nanocyte class, which we touched on a little bit earlier. You want to use a swarm of nanites to get your dirty work done? Here you go. It is a constitution-based class, and you can use either strength or dex for combat purposes. You can teach your nanites how to form certain gear, like weapons or cybernetic augmentations, tech, and personal items. And I won't go into all the nanite abilities here, but you can choose a specialty path that you want to go down. Discorporation allows you to break down and reform your own body. Infestation lets you infest nanites into your enemies. Obliteration, well, that pretty much is self-explanatory. Redirection allows the nanites to redirect attacks, move objects, and things like that. And regeneration gives you healing. Overall, it seems like a really fun and thematic class if the idea of controlling a swarm of deadly nanites appeals to you. As far as the other character options, the biohacker gets anesthesiology and cybermedicine as fields of study. The envoy can gain a signature item and become a tech whisperer. The mechanic can dabble in experimental explosives and experimental vehicles, and we'll talk more about vehicles in a minute. There are also quite a few new options for drones, including chassis for artillery drones, protocol drones, and sage drones. The Mystic gains the Glitch Ghost connection, which gives you control over technological devices. Your Operative can become a bandit, a driver, an improviser, or a sniper. The Solarian gains a few new revelations and the Electrical Attunement. The Soldier gets the Bullet Rain and Powerhouse fighting styles. The Technomancer can specialize in drone or junk technomancy, and you can even get a little gremlin companion. The Vanguard gains the obsolescence and regression aspects, and the Witch Warper gains access to the infinite tech ability, allowing them to pull technological items into existence. The book includes loads of new equipment, stores to visit, hover chairs, armor, augmentations, weapons, technological relics, demolitions, and it introduces dynamic hacking. Dynamic hacking takes what is normally a straightforward skill check and makes it rather more involved and exciting, more like something you might see in Shadowrun. You create a hacking persona based on 3 sub-skills called Deceive, Hack, and Process. And multiple team members can hack at once, either as the lead or the support hacker. And then it basically unfolds like a little mini game with several new skills and abilities. It's a pretty cool way to make your hacking feel a little bit more impactful and fun in your games. Tech Revolution also gives you a whole chapter about vehicles with information to help players build their own custom vehicles, including boats, cruisers, cycles, flyers, hovercraft, submersibles, tanks, trucks, and walkers. There's also info on modding vehicles, stat blocks for whole new vehicles, from dirigibles to mobile command centers. As a GM, you also get information on creating vehicle encounters. And finally, maybe the biggest addition to the Starfinder mythos here is mechs. There is a whole chapter about creating mechs, combining them Voltron style, using them as transformers, which can switch between vehicle and mech form. Just pretty much everything you would want, I think. There is a whole mech subsystem so that each player can create and augment the mech of their dreams, mech warrior style. You can choose their frames, their legs, their arms, their power cores, weapons, auxiliary systems, everything. You get all the details you need to create mech encounters and run mech combat. And you get pre-built mechs for factions like the Aslanti Star Empire, the Corpse Fleet, the Hell Knights, the Vescarium, and a couple of others, I think. It's pretty fantastic. Tech Revolution will also run you $40 for the hardcover or $10 for the PDF. If you're a GM who wants to tell more grounded stories or run a Voltron, Shadowrun, Transformers, or Mech Warrior style adventure, this is the book for you. And we're going to save the last book right here, Drift Crisis, for last. But first, let me give you a roundup of 4 of the most recent adventure books. Here, 42 through 45, the last books for the Horizons of the Vast adventure path. Put that up here. This is the adventure where your party is tasked with settling a new planet out in the vast. But you're just one of many groups setting up colonies on the world, and the planet itself has a pretty mysterious and maybe a troubling history. I interviewed Ron Lundeen about the first book, Planetfall, in a video that you can see in the eye in the corner of your screen up there. Now, this part of the video is going to contain spoilers for the adventure. I am not going to go into too many details on these books, but I want to give you an idea of what to expect in each one so you can decide if this is an adventure path you want to run as a GM. So feel free to use the segmented timeline below me to jump ahead if you might want to play this adventure one day as a player. So book 3 is Whispers, make sure I have the right one out here, Whispers of the Eclipse by Kate Baker. In this adventure, the party actually gets called away from their home settlement to help a neighboring colony with their problems, including their missing governor. So we're getting away from the home base that the players have been building up and the NPCs that they may have been, coming to really care about or maybe come to hate. So the players will get to go to a new settlement and they'll be asked to help with a gang problem, a labor negotiation, a food shortage, and a theater that the populace is fighting to reopen. There is still a hex map to explore, but they can't make any new claims until the end of this particular book. Chapter 2 has the PCs tracking the missing governor and her team through a jungle teeming with dinosaurs and other dangerous fauna and flora. In the end, they track them down to a nearby Aslanti moon base, so the PCs will have to finally outfit a starship for the very first time in this adventure path to track her down. It seems like the governor was slowly being corrupted by some sort of dark influence as well. And by the end, that neighboring colony will ask the PC's permission to add their territory to the PC's own. The Adventure Toolbox gives you updates on the other charters, as usual, a history of the Aslanti Star Empire, including some player options like armor and weapons and ship parts that all harken back to more or less modern day right now or the near future. The bestiary includes new vampire monsters and graft templates. Chapter 3 of the Horizons of the Vast Adventure Path returns it to a more traditional adventure. There's still exploration to be had, but the colony building takes a little bit more of a backseat as the meta plot of the story kind of starts to get teased a little bit more. But let's talk about part number 4. It's called Icebound by Jason Tondro. This adventure kicks off with the PCs attempting to build a satellite network in orbit from their chapter, which involves some politics and negotiating to get the expertise they need to get it completed, and then some more labor disputes that they need to settle, plus a few more favors to do, all the while being secretly opposed from within their own settlement by an NPC they crossed back in Book 2, which can be a nice callback if you had the forethought
thought to really lay those seeds on thick in Book 2. Once the satellite system is up and running, the PCs use it to detect a Vesk distress call coming from the Arctic Circle, so it is off to do some icy exploration. Turns out the ship was a scout for a possible Vesk invasion of the system, but the ship was taken over by the Swarm before it crashed on the planet. There is a secret Swarm base further out in the star system that the PCs are going to have to invade and neutralize. So this book involves quite a bit of fast-paced and pretty thrilling infiltrating and hit-and-run combat against the Borg-like Swarm. But the adventure still gives time for the players to cultivate their charter. By the end, the PCs will learn that the Swarm were developing defenses against negative necrotic energy, though they don't yet know why. This kind of energy has been seen before in the adventure path, and they should have lingering questions about what the true mission of that Vesk, that crashed Vesk ship was that came in. So the toolbox here gives you information about the Vesk version of the Tal Shiar, their intelligence operations, which they call Directive 9, and there's some gear and vehicles and stat blocks to go along with it, plus a nice Directive 9 archetype featuring a Skinnermander version of James Bond. You also get some player options for high-altitude adventuring, including airships and powered armor. There are some new Swarm gear options and instructions on making your own Swarm enemies. Okay, moving on to book number 5 here. It's Allies Against the Eye by Jabari Weathers. And this is where the meta plot really comes into focus. Basically, every 100 years or so, a wave of negative energy washes over the system, destroying all sentient life there. The wave originates from a creature known as Mixanoi. It's going to be hard for me to pronounce. A pair of researchers almost found a way to protect the system from the wave, but they perished underneath a research lab that the PCs actually explored back in Book 1. They rose as ghosts to finish their work, and the PCs head off in that direction here in Book 5 as they find themselves in competition with essentially some cultists of this Mixanoi creature. They explore the underground lab again, further down this time. They deal with the undead lurking there, and they recover their plans for the device, but they have to then confront the cultists in orbit around the planet's moon. Once they're taken care of, the main thrust of the book is for the PCs to gather allies from the other charters and beyond. And this section involves a lot of missions and favors for the PCs to undertake to build that coalition. Then they need to deal with the emissaries from the Pact Worlds and the Veskarium and form whatever alliances they wish, the fruits of which will become apparent in the final book of the AP. It's kind of fun. The toolbox is chock full of new player options this time, but first it gives you information on the cult, the Order of the Culling Shadow it's called, with gear and a new Vanguard aspect, the Inevitable. You also get other charter updates, some new player options for PCs who want to lean into diplomacy, which is very much needed in this particular book. The Mystic gains a cultural zeitgeist connection with new abilities. The Operative can become a data broker. The Soldier can take on the Commander fighting style, and the Vanguard also gains the Disobedience aspect. There are some new feats and spells as well, and then you have a briefing on the Eye of Entropy from the Shadari Confederation, and it even becomes a Mystic connection. And there's an Entropic One archetype as well. And that brings us to the final book, The Culling Shadow by Landon Winkler. And from reading through it, I think it gives you a pretty good payoff for all the work your PCs have put into this adventure path. The outcome of their charter, their settlement at the end of this adventure will be mostly determined by how well they built up their colony, how well they maintain relations with the other charters, whether or not they were able to form an alliance with the Pact Worlds or the Veskarium, and how shrewdly they may have negotiated with Veskarium, and how they handled the dozens of other events in this book and the previous ones. The first big battle, like really big battle, is between the Order of the Culling Shadow Armada and whatever armada the PCs are able to put together here using the Armada battle rules in the Starship Operations Manual. After that, they need to fully neutralize the cult's base and take out its leader in that lunar base. And the campaign concludes with an adventure to take out Mixanoi? Never. They take that thing out once and for all using the Starship combat rules. And as always, they give you a lot of ways to continue the campaign if you like, including having a dragon egg crash onto the planet, an Algothu uprising from deep underneath the planet, a zombie plague, an invasion of the system, and several other potential story hooks. There's plenty of opportunities to carry your campaign up to level 20 if you want to. The campaign proper ends at 13th level. The toolbox in this adventure includes information on the negative energy plane, the Void Walker Mystic Connection, the Void Nomad theme, a precog anchor called the Unmaking, and some new spells. The new adventure path coming up soon is Drift Crash, and we'll be talking about that here on the channel pretty soon. Overall, Horizons of the Vast seems to have pulled off a pretty good version of Kingmaker in space. As a GM, you will need to develop quite a few touchstone NPCs in the charter, whom you can weave in and out of all these books to keep things feeling grounded and important for the PCs. Book 1 gives you like 24 NPCs to start with, but you need to track and develop them yourself once you get past book 2. It's also going to be important to give the other charters plenty of personality as they become more and more important during the story. Those relationships are also key to telling a grand story of coming together to fight a common foe. If building up this planet, forming alliances, and fighting off this powerful extraplanar foe sounds like fun to you, I think Horizons of the Vast will treat you pretty well. Each book is $23 or $16 for the PDF. And I don't have time to go through every Starfinder Society mission that's come out since we last talked, but I want to give you just some of the highlights. Season 4, the Year of the Data Scourge, wrapped up with Scenario 16, Hope for the Future, and from all the reports I've seen online, people have been pretty happy with how it wrapped up. If you're looking for some fun mini campaigns to run, grabbing the meta plot related scenarios for a given Starfinder Society season can be a fun way to put one together. There seems to be several standout scenarios in this season too, including Scenario 8, Precious Cargo. Scenario 12, A Festive Operation, is perfect for a Christmas time Starfinder adventure. Scenario 9, Through Sea and Storm, features a really fun storm giant set of encounters. Well worth checking out if you're looking for 4 to 5 hour one-shots. And Season 5 has kicked off the Year of Redemption's Rise. The Starfinder Society has broken apart along faction lines, and now you're going to be working with the First Seeker to put the Society back together again with some new factions and some familiar faces, including Zigvigix and Royo. And our friend Alison Seib wrote Scenario 3, which features pop star cats and mechs, and I think that's all you really need to know. It's called Combatants Concerto, Fugue of the Traitor. It actually continues an ongoing story from previous seasons, well worth checking out. And now all that's left to chat about is Drift Crisis, which is right here. So I'm going to send it back to Theo of the Past in Seattle and Starfinder Senior Developer Mr. John Compton. So take it away, Theo.
Whew, that was a lot of stuff y'all come out with lately.
Whole lot of things.
But what we just got in the mail not a week or two ago was the big hardcover Drift Crisis book. How long have y'all been building up to this? Has this been something that's been planned since the beginning, or something they all came up with along the way? Where did this all come from?
This has been probably about a year and a half in the making, maybe 2 years. So I'd mentioned a little bit earlier how there are lots of things that Starfinder did really well right out of the gate, and there are some things where they're kind of bigger question marks. And the drift has been one of those top 5 setting features the whole time. But at the same time, it's what is it really? It was brought to us by this machine god Triune who gave it out, and it was no strings attached. And you're but seriously, what's the catch, Triune? And we love seeing these fan theories about what the drift's real story is. But we also looked at things and we said, when we look at our adventure paths, when we look at our adventures and our scenarios, it's so easy for people to be going to this one little planet, and if the planet blows up, the galaxy keeps going. So there's a little bit of stakes that have not quite existed in Starfinder before. You can always just pick up and go somewhere completely different and say, "Oops, leave it all behind." So what we really wanted was some sort of galaxy-spanning event that was going to allow us to not only make it a little bit harder for you to escape this thing, but also allow us to tell stories across a huge variety of places. So that way, if you're playing an adventure path, you kind of know what your next year of gaming looks like. Mm-hmm. And somebody comes out with a cool adventure path 1 month into that, and you're like, buddy, I'm spoken for. Mm-hmm. So one of the key things for Drift Crisis was being able to build it so that it was easy to pick up and put into ongoing games. So you didn't have to have that lag or that, maybe talk to me in 2024 sorts of responses. And on top of that, it's the drift. Pretty much anybody who touches the Starfinder setting is going to know about the drift, where if we'd chosen anything else, there'd be we'd have to lay out some big groundwork first. So The Drift Crisis is this opportunity for us to say, let's tell a big story that has so many angles that we could never publish every adventure about it. So we're presenting these adventure seeds that allow the GMs and the players to be creating their own stories based on some really detailed frameworks that we give them. And one of the great things I've heard from a couple of people who've gotten the Drift Crisis already is that that's one of those GM skills that they've been lacking, and we've not had the resources for them. It's like, I never really knew how to create a campaign outline for a homebrew adventure. And now we have 20 different examples of different sizes. And so it kind of makes us wonder, like, hey, does this kind of also adapt how we present some GM tools in the future so that we can make sure that our homebrew audience is having all the things that they need to succeed, as well as the people who are running our adventure paths?
And it feels like something to me. Now, I've only been with Pathfinder since Pathfinder 2nd Edition started. And so this feels a little bit unprecedented to have this kind of event where it's going to cover multiple adventures, because you have Drift Crashers and Drift Hackers, if I'm remembering those correctly. Yep. And you've also got like little one-shots coming out, shorter adventures, and you have the whole guidebook. And then you have, like you said, like these adventure seeds that are a couple pages long to kind of lay out the framework of a campaign you can run. And is there any precedent for this, like in Pathfinder in the past 20 years or so? Or is this something is totally new to the way you do storytelling?
There are a couple of inspirations from things that we've published before. If you look back at Pathfinder First Edition, some of our books like Lost Cities of Galarian and Druma Prophets and Prophecies have sections in them where they say, okay, you want to play something in this place? Here are a couple of sample story arcs and how you can approach it from a low level, a mid level, and a high level perspective. And it'll provide like a paragraph or two for each one. So that provides a little bit of inspiration for how we approach this. Another, though, is the idea of doing a big event. The main one that I'd point to for Pathfinder First Edition is the Wrath of the Righteous cycle. Because for that, we had a Pathfinder Society organized play season about it. We had the Wrath of the Righteous adventure path. We had Mythic Adventures coming out. We had a Pathfinder Tales tie-in novel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you could play all sorts of angles of what's happening with the Mendevian Crusade. But that still didn't have quite a anchoring book. It had a little campaign setting book to say what is the world wound now, but not really what's the world wound going to be like afterward. And we know that by the time we get into several of the books later, when we start to incorporate post Drift Crisis stuff, that's way later than some people need. So with Drift Crisis, we also wanted to provide some tools for what happens after this. So whatever you decide about what caused the Drift Crisis and how your players solved it, we're giving you in Chapter 3 some knowledge about what comes after, especially a little peek behind the curtain, and we explicitly tell you what is Paizo going to be assuming going forward. But all of this is optional. So if you say, I hear what you're doing with that and that, but I want X, Y, and Z to be true, we say, yeah, that's totally fine. We tell you what the canonical cause of the Drift Crisis is in Chapter 3, but in Chapter 1, which is this low spoiler, player-safe chapter to read through and enjoy, we provide 6 or 7 different theories that range from, this sounds plausible to, it was aliens, level of thing. And if you see one of those rumors, even one of the kookier ones that you want to have be true, you can do that. We tell you repeatedly, please just choose the version you like. And by telling this massive crowdsourced series of stories all across the galaxy, we're still only filling 1% of what the galaxy setting even has as far as planets go. So every single little component of this that you're running for Drift Crisis is telling part of a bigger picture, and as you share your stories online, you are showing a bigger and bigger part of what the Drift Crisis can be. So by the time that we do formally wrap it up, then we have this massive narrative, we're ready to move on to the next thing, and we're ready to see how the Starfinder setting has evolved over time.
I love the way you did that. The way that when I first got the book and I opened up, I was like, I wonder if they're going to tell us what the canonical reason behind this drift crash is. And so I opened up, started looking through it, and I found that. And I was like, I love the way you did that, with having options for GMs to do what they want to, but also if you're going to, do campaign after campaign after campaign and let them build on each other, which is a great thing that Pathfinder and Starfinder let you do, since they all kind of do take place in the past and they kind of lead into each other a little bit. You now know what path to go on if you want to stay in that canonical timeline.
Absolutely.
And you also lay out, like, these are the adventures coming up, and these are some of the one-shots. Are there any other surprises for Drift Crisis that y'all haven't maybe let out of the bag yet? Or have y'all kind of just like, here's what everything is, and you're ready to go, and now we're just going to plan for afterward?
I think as people start to look into Drift Crisis, the hardcover book, they're going to find that we do a lot of self-reference to the things that we have done over the past 5 years. A lot of the adventure paths are, like, kind of consequences are covered. A lot of our Starfinder Society scenarios kind of get little references. There's Alien Archives 1 through 4 people happening, and you just, like, are looking through the Vast section or the Near Space section. And you're like, oh, I remember when you did a, like, Codex of Worlds in the back of Starfinder number 13 in that place. Okay. So we put some of that stuff into the outline. Our authors researched a bunch of the rest, and we're like, oh, I want to focus on that. And we're like, whoa, good catch. And so it's kind of a fun way of realizing that whatever you were pulling from our existing setting material, you're going to find some references to it of how it might update. And on top of that, even if you don't find your specific thing, there are so many examples of how, like, the Drift Crisis has happened similar, or has affected similar places, that you're going to be able to adapt it real fast. But one of the other things that the Drift Crisis does is it shakes up the status quo. And shaking things up is how you get follow-up conflict. So if you read between the lines of some of what Drift Crisis is doing, you're going to see some of the potential campaign conflicts that we're setting up. And just like, this is true for all the time that I've been at Paizo, like, we have to, like, sow a whole bunch of seeds, see what sticks, and then we can just pick up the ones from there. So it's like, there's one of these adventure hooks where it's like, hey, it's off on the periphery, but we have some growing tensions between the Aslanti Star Empire and the Vescarium. When the Drift Crisis is over, like, what's that going to look like? Both of these are empires that have evil as an overarching alignment. Both of these are, like, conquerors. Both of these don't like neighbors. What would the galaxy look like if the two went to war? Like, these are the sorts of bits of groundwork that we want to lay so that if we want to do follow-up storytelling with these follow-up adventure paths, it's not coming out of nowhere. It has that foundation for you to tell, and you can say, ooh, we saw that coming.
Do you think there might be more big arcs like this then, like Drift Crisis, storytelling in this format going forward? Or are you going to kind of wait and see how the response to this is?
This is very much an experiment. We have taken a bit of a risk on this. We've, as you've been pointing out, we've never really put out a book quite like this. So we're really looking forward to hearing not only how people use the book, but whether what parts were helpful for them, what parts were good, and whether the event overall was just an energizing thing for our Starfinder community. And if it is, then, we're going to release a couple of more familiar books coming up. We've already announced Interstellar Species, kind of our advanced species guide or whatever equivalent, but for Starfinder. But, several books from now, we might start saying, Drift Crisis went over great. Let's do another one of those, but with bleh. And when we were planning out Drift Crisis, we had about a dozen ideas on the whiteboard that we were choosing between. And we ended up saying, Drift Crisis is the good choice right now. But we have a bucket to go back to and take another dip out of. So if it works out, and if people let us know that it's working out, we're ready.
I love that. I've got one more question for you before we wrap up.
Yeah.
And this is one that it's unrelated to Drift Crisis, I think, but it's one that I've heard a couple of times at this con. And so I just wanted to ask you, and even amongst my player base from my campaigns and some of my our fans of the channel, any plans for Strawberry Machine Cake going forward?
Yeah, Strawberry Machine Cake, always a favorite. The not quite K-pop band, but holographic pop music, I believe it was. Yeah, so fan favorite from Starfinder Society. They're always kind of on the periphery of storytelling possibilities, kind of like Zoe is.
Zoe is another great one.
So that's one where when we're considering new storylines, it's like, hey, what's going to be a good fit? Is this a good fit for Strawberry Machine Cake? Is this a good fit for Zoe? And sometimes it's like, yeah, we can kind of put them in, but we're always asking ourselves, like, is this doing a service to whatever this fan favorite sub-property is? Or is it best to save it for just that right thing? And I can tell you there's been at least one fun planning session for upcoming products where Strawberry Machine Cake did come up numerous times. So we'll see what comes out of that, you know?
All right, I like it. Now, if people want to follow you, do you have like a social media presence that people can find what you've been working on, what you're excited about?
Yeah, so I have a Twitter account or Twitter handle at Archeotag, ARCHAEOTAGH. I also spend a fair amount of time on the Starfinder Discord server, which you publicly joinable. Can ask any questions there and just engage and share your fun ideas. And I periodically pop on and say, that is darn cool.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll come back somewhere down the road when you have some exciting new projects you want to talk about. We'd love to hear from you again. We do interviews on the channel every now and again, so we'd love to just maybe get you on Zoom when we're not even here in person together, if you're up for that.
That sounds great.
Awesome. Well, thank you to John. Also, thank you to our sponsor, Hit Point Press, and their deck of mini animated spell cards. If you want to add a little magical flair to your games right now, be sure to check out the animated spell cards from our sponsor, Hit Point Press. These animated spell cards give you everything you need to run and play your spells in 5e games. You have all the rules on one side, and then some awesome animated art on the other side. They have 8 frames of lenticular animation on every card. And if you want to expand beyond just spell cards, they also have animated condition cards, animated NPC townsfolk, and 2 in-game items, the Deck of Illusions and the Deck of Many Things. Go check them out right now at animatedspells.com or use the link below the video. So again, thank you for joining us today. Me and John were here at PaizoCon. They are wrapping things up. We have a couple of gift bags here, swag bags that they're looking to give away. Otherwise, they're tearing things down. You looking forward to getting home and getting a little rest after all this?
It's always an opportunity to recharge when you go to a convention like this, but it's also a time to crash after you're done.
Yeah, I can imagine. So we're going to head out, but we will see you back here soon on the Gallant Goblin. Take care.